Andy, my dude, have you heard of the magical website builder known as Squarespace?
Ugh, not another Squarespace ad. I feel like every podcast is sponsored by them.
Hey, don't knock it till you try it. Yes, okay, it is overhyped, but actually it lives up to the hype. Squarespace is like a website fairy godmother. With a click of a button, your site transforms into a beautiful masterpiece.
A website fairy godmother? That sounds interesting. What makes it so magical?
Well, for starters, those slick templates make anyone look like a professional web designer. Pick one, customize the colors and fonts to match your brand, and voila. Plus, the drag and drop fluid engine is so easy, your grandma could build a site on Squarespace.
Well, she did knit me a lovely scarf last Christmas. Maybe website design is next.
Exactly. And when you're ready to sell your Nana's handmade scarves online, Squarespace has built-in e-commerce. Add a store with one click. Get flexible payment options. Then watch those sales roll in. And when she wants to teach others her steezy scarf skills, Squarespace's new courses feature is just the ticket. Nana can set up her curriculum and enrollments and payments in a snap and become the next e-knitting influencer.
Oh, wow, you really sold me with the grandma angle. Sign me up for that free trial.
Just go to thenextreel.com/Squarespace and transform your site into a beautiful Squarespace masterpiece.
Well, thanks, Pete. Even though it's overhyped, Squarespace actually sounds perfect for Nana's site's needs. Appreciate the warning on the ads, though. I'll brace myself next time I listen to a podcast.
Anytime. Let me know if you need any help getting that site up and running. Andy, can you believe we've almost hit 700 episodes of The Next Reel?
I know, it's crazy. And with all the other episodes in our family of podcasts, we are well over 1,200 episodes of movie conversation. It's really pretty amazing that we've gotten to have these in-depth movie chats every week for over a decade now.
And we couldn't have done it without our loyal community of film fans. Their support over the years has meant so much.
For sure. That reminds me, we should give the merch store a shout out. Buying shirts from thenextreel.com/merch is a great way listeners can continue to support the show. Plus, they get to sport our great designs.
Absolutely. I think sometimes folks forget we have a variety of shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more available. In fact, a great place to start is with a shirt sporting the Next Reel's logo.
We also have that classic Fast Times Spicoli Surf School tee, or the weirdly popular Rusty's European Tour shirt.
The one from National Lampoon's European Vacation. Why is that so popular?
Search me, but we have sold a ridiculous number of those. I guess there are a lot of Rustys taking trips to Europe?
We're always adding new designs based on movies we've covered, like our brand new design for a streetcar named Desire, featuring a streetcar named Desire. So if you want to rep your love of TNR and films, head to thenextreel.com/merch.
Every purchase helps us continue to have these weekly in-depth conversations. So visit thenextreel.com/merch today.
And as always, thanks for listening and being a part of the Next Reel community. We've got lots more great movie chats coming your way. This is The Next Reel, everybody. I'm Pete Wright, and that there is Andy Nelson.
This is actually the stunt double of Andy Nelson.
Sometimes I let him do the wide shots, and we spoil movies. Tonight on the show, we are Sex Bomb 1, 2, 3, 4. Before we get into that, you should learn more about us at thenextreel.com. Subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast app, or follow us on Twitter and Facebook at The Next Reel.
And if you're a regular listener of the show and you're interested in supporting our ongoing work investigating great film, please consider a regular donation through our Patreon page at patreon.com/thenextreel.
We got a blot spot. Andy, friend of the show, Ben Lott, has written in with his rebound on Kundun.
Kundun felt like watching a documentary in history class. It was interesting information, but didn't exactly entertain me. I wonder if it might have made the story more intriguing when the Dalai Lama is questioning himself, if they hadn't made it so blatantly clear that he was Kundun from the beginning. A fine film, but not one for me. Your rank 220, my rank 227.
I assume you're going to tell him that he also needs to go put this on his calendar to watch in 5 years.
Yeah, I am. I'm going to be calling you both. 5 years.
5 years.
It's that time.
It's time, Andy. Let's do trailers.
My trailer, Pete. In case you didn't know this, There's this little distribution company called A24.
Uh-huh. Oh, wait a minute. I think, how have I heard them? Oh, yes, you have an unnatural obsession with everything they do?
Pretty much, that's them.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and so if I'm struggling trying to find a trailer, I'm like, hey, I'll see what A24 has out there. And so I'm going with the trailer for their film Woodshock, which is going to be coming out later in the year. Woodshock is a film, it looks like it's written and directed by Kate and Laura Molivy. They are the founders of Rodart, I think it's a fashion line. And they are the founders of that. And I guess somehow because of what they do there, they got involved in the costume design for Black Swan, the fantastic ballet film. And then somehow it turned into an opportunity for them to write and direct their own feature film, which is Woodshock. It is coming out later this year, like I said. The official synopsis reads, Kirsten Dunst stars as Teresa, a haunted young woman spiraling in the wake of profound loss, torn between her fractured emotional state and the reality-altering effects of a potent cannabinoid drug. Immersive, spellbinding, and sublime, Woodshock transcends genre to become a singularly thrilling cinematic experience that marks the arrival of the Molivy siblings as a major new voice in film. I don't really know if I get much of the story from here. I mean, I do get a sense that Kirsten Dunst's character really is going through this profound loss. It looks like there's I don't know if it's an assisted suicide or her mom is going through something, and she's giving her mom this drug, and then she starts taking it, and then it is a trippy trailer, and that's really what you get for most of it is her balance between like reality and this world-altering place that she's going to with this drug. And it's an interesting story. I don't know if it's something that I would really love, but at the same time, I love the artfulness of the trailer, and I love that it looks like they're really using kind of old techniques of like double exposure images and the way that they are kind of cutting it together. It's incredibly beautiful, and it really, really drew me in. So, like I said, I don't know if I'll love it, but it's certainly something that I want to check out. What do you think?
Well, the trailer is beautiful nonsense. It does. It's nonsense, but you're right. I mean, it's beautiful, and I think it is really it harkens back to techniques, as you say, that we don't see very often anymore. However they achieved them, if they faked them digitally or if they did them in camera and shot on film, I don't know, but it was lovely to watch, and it makes zero sense. But as we are sometimes want to do, I want to bookend your beautiful rendition of the synopsis, the official synopsis, with the IMDb synopsis. Because I think it adds an extra layer as we peel back this onion. Here you go. A woman falls deeper into paranoia after taking a deadly drug. And that's the end of that.
Oh, Amazon. I want to attribute it to Amazon.
Yeah, right? Anyway, that's terrible. The thing that actually has me most curious, it has nothing to do with the filmmaking, nothing to do with the story, because as I've said, nonsense. This stars or has in the cast, beyond Kirsten Dunst, both Lorelei Linklater and Jack Kilmer. So we've got Linklater's daughter and Val Kilmer's son in the same film right next to each other, and that makes me curious. I mean, I know we've seen them in a whole bunch of other stuff. Particularly Jack Kilmer, he was just in, The Nice Guys, and he was in Stanford Prison Experiment, and so he's got some things going on. But it's just, I like seeing children, second-generation people all in the same movie. That makes me happy.
That's pretty cool. I definitely want to see them doing some more stuff, too. Looks like this only has a release date right now in the U.S., and that is September 15th. So end of summer, we'll be checking this one out.
My trailer, Andy, is To the Bone. To the Bone is a Netflix production, and it stars Keanu Reeves, Lily Collins, Carrie Preston. It is written and directed by Marty Noxon. Now, do you know Marty Noxon?
Nope.
That disappoints me, Andy. That disappoints me greatly. Marty Noxon has been in my life as a creator and producer and writer and director of film and television for 25 years. She was a major contributor to the Buffy, the Vampire Slayer, and Angel universes. She's been on since then quite a bit. She's a consulting producer all up and down Glee. She's an incredible talent. You hear her, I've seen her speak a couple of times, and she's just super, super smart. And this is her first feature that she has written and directed. It is the story of Lily Collins dealing with anorexia. Well, not Lily Collins. Actually, Lily Collins plays the character of Ellen, who is living with anorexia and goes into treatment, and her doctor is Keanu Reeves, and it is the story for her of her trying to find her life again. Sure, it could become maudlinly sentimental. I'm okay with that. I feel like I know what I'm getting. Marty Noxon has earned enough credibility in my book that I'm going to see this no matter what. I think it looks like it could be a really touching, nice film. What do you think?
You look at Lily Collins in something like Mirror, Mirror. Not that you want to watch that movie, but you look at her in that film, and then you look at her in this film, and it's horrifying. And I'm sure there's some makeup involved in making her look so anorexic and just frightfully thin. But it's really scary to see her. I mean, it's like Christian Bale when he was in The Machinist, something where an actor goes to this extreme level to make their body fit the role, and it's really kind of frightening. She really just it's horrifying to look at her in this, and it's really impressive that she went to these lengths to play this role. That alone really piques my curiosity, and I mean it's an interesting cast, and it looks like it's not a unique story, but it looks like the characters and kind of what they're doing with it are what would draw me in, and it certainly piqued my curiosity. The
star rating so far on IMDb is, out of 183 views so far, is 8.3 out of 10. Now, I don't usually give a whole lot of credit to that star rating thing unless it's super, super low, and I have certainly recommended trailers off of movies where the star rating is super, super low, and they have, true to form, been terrible movies. But this does give me hope that, in fact, there's a lot standing behind this movie, and I'm pretty excited about it. It premiered at Sundance in January. It releases for all in just a couple of weeks, July 14th, on Netflix, and the only other opening we have is Netherlands, August 18th. I guess that's some sort of a theatrical release. I don't know. It doesn't say internet there, so who knows? But that's all I've got. Be on the lookout for To the Bone.
Excellent.
You're right. I should send out a mass text about this.
Hey, what's up? I'll leave you alone forever now. You know this one girl with hair like this?
Yes, that's Ramona Flowers.
She's out of your league.
You know her? Tell me now.
She just moved here, got a job at Amazon.
I have to order something really cool.
Scott, are you waiting for the package you just ordered?
Maybe.
Scott Pilgrim?
Hi, I was thinking about asking you out, but then I realized how stupid that would be.
That's okay. You just need to sign for this, all right?
So do you want to go out sometime?
If I say yes, will you sign for your damn package?
So yeah, 8 o'clock? Come to this Battle of the Bands thing.
You have a band?
Yeah, we're terrible.
1, 2, 3,
Mr. Pilgrim! I'm Ramona's first evil ex-boyfriend.
What?
Wait, we're fighting over Ramona?
Didn't you get my email explaining the situation?
I skimmed it. What was that all about?
If we're gonna date, you may have to defeat my 7 evil exes.
So what you're saying is we are dating?
I guess.
Does that mean we can make out?
Sure.
Scott Pilgrim! Prepare to feel the wrath of the League of Evil Exes.
Ramona dated twins.
At the same time? If you want something bad, you have to fight for it. Step up your game, Scott. Combo! Break out the L word.
Lesbian?
The other L word.
Lesbians?
Scott Pilgrim versus the World, Andy. Directed by Edgar Wright, written by Michael Bacall. Edgar Wright and the talented comic artist behind the original graphic novels, Bryan Lee O'Malley. This film stars Michael Cera, Allison Pill, Mark Webber, Johnny Simmons, Ellen Wong, Kieran Culkin, Anna Kendrick, Aubrey Plaza, Mary Elizabeth Winstead, and more. We will talk about. It is the story of dear Scott dating a high school girl and then a stunning anime girl, roller skater, Amazon delivery girl, and he has to fight her evil exes before they can date. And this film, we already talked to the good Nick Langdon, didn't we?
That's right. We spoke with him just a little bit ago, and we're going to jump to that conversation right now to figure out why he picked this and why he loves it so much. From down under, hey there, Nick. How you doing?
Hey, thanks for having me on the show.
Nick Langdon, you have been a constant contributor and a dear friend of the show and a great conversant participant in our Slack channel. We are so glad that you are here doing picking the listener's choice movie for us this round. It's about time, in other words.
Well, thank you very much. It's always nice to have people I can blather on with about nerdy obsessions like movies. So it's been a great pleasure.
And you picked a great one for us to chat about this time. It is Scott Pilgrim versus the World, which is really exciting because we've already talked about a number of, in fact, all of Edgar Wright's films.
As you probably know, I did actually stumble across the next reel by Googling Hot Fuzz podcast because I was just looking to see if there was any intelligent conversation out there in the universe about the oeuvre of Edgar Wright. And that's how I found your podcast. So it's sort of appropriate that we are talking about Scott Pilgrim.
Oh, that's fantastic.
What is it about Edgar Wright that attracts you to him as a filmmaker and to his films?
A lot of things, I suppose. Obviously, the first thing is that they're very funny. And a lot of mainstream comedies, especially the Hollywood, the Judd Apatow, Will Ferrell movies, I don't find funny. I don't like sort of pratfalls, yelling and swearing, which is sort of the mainstream of comedy. I like quirky, character-based comedies as well. So obviously that's an appeal with Edgar Wright. There's also a great rewatchability to his films. Scott Pilgrim is one of the densest films with all the numerology and counting stuff and all the visual effects that fill the screen. All the jokes that you might not pick up on until you watch it for the 6th or 7th time, his editing, his scene transitions, there's so much to dig into. And he's also such a film fan too. Like a lot of directors, if you're in the movie business, you're obviously like a fan, but he is like an obsessive and he'll always put in these references to older movies. And the more films that you watch, the more things that you pick up in his film. So he's like a sort of cinephile director, but one who doesn't take himself particularly seriously. His films are always light and entertaining, even though they also have deeper messages as well. So he's just an all-round great filmmaker, and visually I think he's one of the most exciting directors working at the moment. We were just talking about Baby Driver. There was like the first shot of the trailer was like a close-up of a salt shaker being slid across a diner table, and you're like, that's an Edgar Wright shot. You could tell it straight away with one close-up of a condiment.
Yeah, he's a very interesting director. I love watching Edgar Wright's films. And Scott Pilgrim is kind of an interesting one. It's based on a graphic novel. It wasn't something original that he'd kind of come up with Simon Pegg, and he co-wrote it with Michael Bacall. And it's kind of a different beast, but at the same time, it still feels so much like something that he would do. And I've never read the graphic novels. I'd only seen the film, but watching the film, I'm like, man, it fits so perfectly with the temperament and just the style and just everything that Edgar Wright puts into films.
Have you read it, Pete?
I have not, and it's been several years since I've seen the movie too, and so now I'm thinking before I watch the movie again, I'm going to pick up some of these graphic novels because I feel like that's it's time. If I'm going to really get it, I want to get it, with the full scope of the canon. I assume you have read the graphic novel?
I did. I chased them up after I'd seen the film, and it's actually really funny. The first volume is basically the first 25 minutes of the movie. It pretty much follows it beat for beat, and then after that they have to compress it because the books take place over about a 6-month period, whereas the movie is like 2 weeks. and there's a whole heap of different more characters and more backstory. So obviously you can go in a lot deeper into the books, but the first one is really interesting. Is it's essentially the first act. Although Scott Pilgrim vs. the World is interesting because it's not a 3-act movie. It's like a video game movie where you've got 7 levels and then the boss that you have to defeat twice at the end. But the first, if you want to call it the first act, it's very much like the first book, and I highly recommend them if you like the humour of Scott Pilgrim. That was why everyone was saying after the first book was published, oh, you and Edgar Wright, Bryan Lee O'Malley, got to get together. You've got the same kind of visual style, the same sort of references, and the same sort of skewed take on the world, and that's how they ended up getting together.
Something that Edgar Wright tends to do is he finds really interesting characters that all feel unique and they all speak their own language. You know, they just I love how interesting all of the characters are in his films, no matter how small their parts are. And I remember reading the screenplay for this, and I don't know I don't know how much they pulled from the graphic novels when they wrote the screenplay, but I was so impressed with the way that these guys wrote the script and they introduced all the different characters from Sexba Bomb, and how they were all each individually defined as a character by the type of coffee that they drank. It's such a fun way to picture these characters, and it sets them up so perfectly and so quickly that you know instantly who these characters are. It's smart writing, it's smart storytelling, and it's quick storytelling. Edgar Wright is a real efficient filmmaker. He's able to tell his stories very quickly.
There's actually you're absolutely right what you were saying there, and there's a fantastic example when they have the first Battle of the Bands scene at the Rocket, and there's an amazing scene where it cuts to sort of Ramona there, and Scott's like, "Hey, you totally came," and then we've got Knives turns up. Stacy is there. She introduces herself, saying, "My brother is chronically enfeebled." So then it introduces Stacy. Mentions Knives, and Knives kisses Scott, and then Ramona looks at Scott. So we've got that relationship already established. Then there's Stacey introduces her boyfriend, and she says hi to Ramona. But then Wallace is there, and then Wallace looks at Stacey's boyfriend, setting up a plot point that will later come on, where he's the sort of what's the gay version of a lady killer? He's sort of is famous for stealing the boys. So within like a few seconds and a few of these like camera moves that Edgar Wright does, you've already established all of these characters as their own identities and the relationships between them in a very short amount of time.
One of the pieces that strikes me when I watch Edgar Wright's films, and I think we talked about this a little bit when we talked about Hot Fuzz, is that Edgar Wright trusts the audience to keep up, and that's one of the things that really is on display here. That kind of a sequence is rife for exposition in the hands of another filmmaker, and that he is able to dispense with a lot of the triviality of exposition and just get these relationships established through visual cues is a sign of great trust in a director. And I it's one of the things that keeps me coming back to Edgar Wright's films. And but again, you mentioned the sort of, I don't know, the baffled kind of 3-act structure here into 7 levels. That also allows for some real discrete efficiency. When you compress each individual level, you can move more quickly up the stairs of the narrative to the final boss battle, I think. And that's another thing I'm trying to put my finger on why that feels so much more efficient than looking at the same Scott Pilgrim narrative over getting rid of those bookends. But I really like it. The last point, just on casting, oh my goodness, what a fantastic cast. Like, talk about taking great people that I just adore and putting them all in the same movie.
Yeah, it seems like it was a launching pad for a lot of very successful careers. I mean, you had someone like Chris Evans, who'd been in Fantastic Four, but he wasn't like a huge star. But then the next year after Scott Pilgrim, he's Captain America, and now he's one of the biggest stars in the world. And then you've got Brie Larson, who's Academy Award winner, and this sort of thing. And it was interesting watching Snowpiercer, where you had that weird reunion with Alison Pill and Chris Evans.
Right.
She played the school teacher, and a lot of other people who have gone on to really famous careers all here.
Yeah, I mean, Anna Kendrick, who had already done, Up in the Air, obviously, but also the vampire movies, Twilight, right? She'd already done 2 Twilight movies, but she wasn't really cool until she did Scott Pilgrim. It's really terrific pick, and I'm very excited to watch it. Not just to be entertained. This was an absolutely fantastic selection.
I was going to say one thing about Scott Pilgrim. The other thing about that I really like, one about the directing of the scene transitions, or how it tries like every kind of humor, which most movies don't. The only ones I can think of are like Annie Hall, which sort of tried visual comedy. That subtitle joke, it went into animation at one point, breaking the fourth wall famously with Marshall McLuhan and all that sort of thing. Whereas that's what Scott Pilgrim does. You've got pratfalls, you've got puns, you've got all the things going on the screen, you've got great sound effects. He really, you would have seen that Every Frame of Painting essay on Edgar Wright's humour, and he really goes above and beyond what other directors do. And the other thing about Scott Pilgrim, of course, is that it's a film that I relate to on a level that's quite surprising because it is so silly and fantastical. But in 2004-05, when the first book came out, I was actually living in Canada at the time, and I was failing at romance and spending a lot of time in crappy bars watching local bands of indifferent quality. So I grew up playing like 8-bit video games and watching the sort of cartoons, and so like Scott Pilgrim, who lives his life through pop culture, which is also what happens with the characters in Space. They sort of, their lives are a bunch of movie and TV references. So that thing of living in Canada at the time and going through some of the things Scott Pilgrim did, all a bit with less awesome fighting, that I sort of really relate to that in a way I don't think a lot of people could. Because, again, like when you say Scott Pilgrim emotional, it is a very shallow film, it is a very silly film, but I do think it has some great messages in it about, learning to, if you fall in love with someone, learning to accept all the baggage that comes along with being in a relationship, which is sort of personified by the evil exes, and also the idea when he gets killed and gets the one up and gets back, goes to go and do it again. We all think we've made some terrible mistakes in our lives or done things badly or hurt people. What if we could get another chance and go back? So I do think there's actually a surprising amount of depth for what is such a crazy, lighthearted sort of explosion in a 13-year-old's head of a movie.
Which is something Wright is really good at. I mean, there was that fantastic moment at the end of Shaun of the Dead when his mom, dies, and it's just like there are moments in his films that are they really are really touching and poignant, and it's like he finds a way to hit that honestly, which I think is a real testament to him as a filmmaker.
Well, he said that about the Cornetto trilogy, that he said that all three of them were really relationship films disguised as genre movies. I mean, Shaun of the Dead is supposed to be a zombie movie, but it's really about being in your late 20s and learning to accept responsibility and deal with things that are important in your life while battling the undead. And then Hot Fuzz is about being in your 30s and balancing work and life. You've got the Butterman character, Nick Frost, who's a complete slob and takes his job for granted, but then Angel has no life and he's just purely focused on work. So they both sort of come to this nice middle point where they learn to live and they balance each other out a bit. Meanwhile, there's like a Tony Scott movie breaks out in rural England. And then in The World's End, it's more about being in your 40s and having a midlife crisis. You've got the Gary King character who feels all his friends have become boring sellouts, whereas they think that he's a fool who refuses to grow up. And the film doesn't say that either one of those perspectives is wrong, but they have to work out this midlife crisis while dealing with an alien invasion. And even again, Scott Pilgrim, it's about moving from like adolescent relationships to a grown-up relationships, whereas if you want to bring someone in your life, you've got to deal with all of the things that happened to them before you met them. Scott Pilgrim learns to stop to being a sort of silly little kid and grow up and take a bit of responsibility for him. Like as he famously says in that Dream Desert sequence, I think I learned something, which is a great line.
That's one of the things I like it so much about it so much, though, the film, that he uses, like, I mean, yeah, it's sort of easy to say, oh, that's kind of a lighthearted film, but he uses so many really interesting visual tricks and the graphics on screen that allow us to look at the same sort of sentimentality we've been looking at, the same sort of emotional depth we've been looking at, like you said, since Say Anything, since Pretty in Pink. Like, these are issues that we deal with at this age, but now we're dealing with it for a whole new audience, and how do we actually portray it in a way that speaks now a new visual language? And I think that's what Scott Pilgrim is exemplifies for me.
Absolutely. And I was saying, like, the thing about like comic book movies, I find them like so visually flat because they're just a standard movie. They don't use any of the visual language of comics. And same with video game movies. They're just usually bad movies that have the characters from video games. But the thing of why they all fail is people don't play video games because they like the characters or the story. They like the games and the atmosphere you get. So if I can use a really pretentious word, there's a lot of intertextuality in Scott Pilgrim versus the World, that he takes all the visual grammar and ideas from comic books with the panels and the divided up frame and all the effects going on, but also from video games. Enemies turn into coins and there's bosses and you get a one-up and that sort of thing, and the whole structure of the movie where you go through the 7 levels rather than the traditional 3 acts. So he's bought all of that from games and comics. That's why people are saying this is like the best video game movie and it's the best comic book movie, because he understands and has a reverence to that material and incorporates it into the film. And that, again, is something that you just don't get in other movies, and that's an other layer of depth to the movie.
Hey, now, Ang Lee tried it in Hulk.
Well, like Kung Fu Hustle was another film I thought, and also this you'll laugh at this one. I was thinking of movies like Scott Pilgrim, Hudson Hawk.
Oh dear!
Remember in Hudson Hawk they tried to do like that reality.
You found the person who talked about that one.
Say, hey, no, you were breaking up. I know what you started to say was they tried to do something brilliant, and then it broke up when you said, and they completely succeeded because that film is brilliant, and then you stopped talking because there was nothing else to say, Nick Langdon.
Listen, I'll defend Hudson Hawk. I think it works brilliantly about 20% of the time, but the other times you kind of see what they were going for and go, that's a cool idea, and it totally didn't work. But I'll defend Hudson Hawk. I think it was a much more entertaining film than I think it's being slightly reassessed. People going, well, it's different. I'll give it that.
They were trying something. That's what you got to say that about filmmakers who at least try something, even if it didn't work. At least they were trying to do something. So
in other movies, unlike Hudson Hawk, in which it did work, shut up, Andy. You guys are listen to you. Just a wholehearted, full-breathed support of Hudson Hawk is the only thing appropriate to say on this movie, and you're killing me.
If you're doing another guilty pleasure, I would love to hear you talk about Hudson Hawk, people.
I have tried so hard, Nick, but Andy so far is the...
I don't have any say in what you pick as your guilty pleasures, Pete.
No, do you know what he does? He takes guilty pleasure series off the schedule. He says, maybe this year let's not do a guilty pleasure.
Well, that did happen.
Maniacal genius, Andy Nelson. Nick Langdon, what did we miss? Anything else you want to... I feel like I started cutting you off earlier. Anything else you want to talk about this film in particular before we let you get back to your day?
I can talk about this film for hours and probably shouldn't. I was going to say, like, another movie, the only other one I could think of was possibly... have you seen Kung Fu Hustle, the Stephen Chow movie?
Fantastic.
Yeah, that sort of... Scott Pilgrim did a bit of that, like, sort of taking like cartoon levels of like action movie fighting, but it's still awesome. I mean, Scott Pilgrim got killed by the Expendables in 2010, but if you look at the Stone Cold Steve Austin versus Sylvester Stallone fight from the end of the Expendables, it's rubbish, whereas the two biggest dweebs in Hollywood, Michael Cera and Jason Schwartzman, fantastic fight. And that's just
brilliant.
Brad Allen, the Jackie Chan's stunt guy who coordinated the fights in Scott Pilgrim, and the dedication of the crew, which I think was great too. And also, like, more Asian films often have those multiple genres in one. Like, I think probably one of the reasons Scott Pilgrim failed at the box office initially was it's a comedy, it's an action movie, it's a romance, it's a musical, and I don't think people knew how to market it. Like, who was the audience for this film? Whereas in like if you watch like a John Woo film, he'll have a movie that's a story of male friendship and a soppy love story and a crime drama and a violent action shootout. And I think there's more flexibility of genre around the world, whereas Hollywood, it seems to go, if it's a comedy, it has to be a comedy. If it's an action movie, it has to be an action movie.
It is a really fun movie, and it's certainly something that we all three love, and so it's going to be fun to talk about on the rest of the show here.
Did you see it at the cinemas? Just interesting.
No, I didn't. I missed this one at the theater. Yeah, it just I don't know. It kind of came and went. It was it did not last long.
Yeah, I did see it in the cinema, but I'll have to say there was probably only about 20 other people in the cinema with me and my girlfriend at the time, so I sort of got the feeling it wasn't doing that well. Yeah, it's screening second run everywhere. They have this Scott Pilgrim video show where they like shine green lasers during the vegan police scene and have garlic bread. They've got like lyrics to the songs on the screen, so it's like a full like Rocky Horror kind of experience, and it's sort of down.
That's so funny.
Struggled before.
Well, we are going to let you get back to your day in Melbourne with just a just a couple of syllables. But again, Nick, thank you so much for joining us, for picking such a terrific film, and for being a part of the community on Slack. We love everything you bring to it.
Well, thanks so much for having me on the show. And the show's brought me a great deal of listening pleasure over the last few years, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what you guys see on your latest rewatch, because again, there is just so much depth in the movie. You can really pick up on new things every time you watch it, and again, it's just every scene just breezes through. It's just so lighthearted to watch. So, thanks for giving me the opportunity to crap on at great length about one of my favourite films.
It's well deserved. I hope Andy does it justice.
It'll be fun.
Scott Pilgrim versus the World, Andy. I had not watched it at the time that we spoke to Nick Langdon. I have now obviously watched it again, and I have begun to consume the graphic novels. Oh my goodness. How did this film hit you on this watch?
This is such an easy film to watch. It's so exciting and vibrant and energetic, and it really does feel like a comic book on screen. I know there have been other filmmakers who have tried to kind of create that. I think Ang Lee did a fairly admirable job with Hulk, although I don't think anything compares to what Edgar Wright did here. I think he just had an intrinsic understanding of the story and the medium and how to blend it all together to kind of create this world. And also I think he's of the generation that really kind of clicked and grew up with those sorts of comic books and the sorts of movies that, fueled some comics and some of the comics that fueled some of the movies, and just it all kind of created the perfect amalgamation of everything in his head, and he was able to kind of bring it forth in this film, which I think is just an incredible delight to watch.
Oh, I think so too. And you know what's amazing? I think that every time I watch this film, I like it more. It had been several years since I've seen it, and I think I'd stopped giving it enough credit over time. You know how that happens?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and so watching it again, it just reminded me not just of it. It feels like it could be light fare. You look at the, you look at the album or the cover art. You look at the poster. You look at sort of the kind of age that it's fitting into, and it feels like light fare. And then you watch it and you realize it's also happens to be the showcase of some incredibly competent visual filmmaking on behalf of Edgar Wright and team. This is a mechanically incredibly smart movie, and it is only bolstered by wonderful, funny performances from the major cast members. It also is a film I couldn't help but think of this film as a film with an incredible personality as a whole, right? Not just individual actors, individual characters having great personality or charisma on screen. This film feels like it has an identity all of its own. Like it truly is greater than the sum of its parts. And I just found it really special on this viewing.
Well, and looking back to the previous Edgar Wright films that we've discussed on the show, his Cornetto trilogy, he has a real strong ability to do genre films, but infuse them with just strong emotional presence from his characters. And you have these moments in the other films, even like Shaun of the Dead, his zombie film, some incredible moments that have incredible just emotional weight, like when his mom gets bit and turns. That was just like an incredibly touching moment when Shaun has to deal with that. Likewise here, as fun as the film is, you have some moments in here where you can really kind of get a sense of Scott Pilgrim as this guy kind of struggling with the world of relationships in his early 20s. And it really kind of, you get that sense and you get that connection with these characters. That's something Wright does really well. And he just, I think that he so far has found the right projects to tap into where he's able to do that.
I get the sense, looking at the relationship piece, your comment, and we talked a little bit about this with Nick, that this, he's making a relationship film for a different generation, who's going to connect with it at a really visceral level, in a way that maybe you and I are incapable of connecting with. Even as it's a terrific film, I'm frankly really interested in showing it to my teenager who has not seen it, because I wonder if she'll get an even different message or a different substance from the film than I do. Let's talk a little bit about. Do you want to talk anything about the script, the traditional 7-act structure?
Yeah, you gotta love that. What are you gonna do with the 7 battles that we have to do? I think they actually handle it really well over the course of it, adapting this 6-volume series of graphic novels into this film. But I did want to. I mentioned in our conversation just how enjoyable the script is to read and just how strong it was right out of the gate. And again, I don't know how much of this was pulled from the graphic novel, but reading Michael Bacall's script before Edgar Wright came on to work on it, just the very first page, I just want to read you the character descriptions as we meet the 3 members of Sex Bob-omb and their 1 superfan, as they're all in Stephen Still's kitchen. And I think that it's so clever the way that it sells them. And it makes for a fun read, and that translates to how they're going to make the film. Stephen Stills, 25, shaggy hair, drinking coffee, parentheses, weak. Kim Pine, 22, cute, bitter, drinking coffee, parentheses, bitter. Young Neil, 17, superfan number 1, drinking coffee, milky. Scott Pilgrim, 22, fresh-faced with an unruly yet adorable mop of hair, drinking coffee, parentheses, sugary. And just in that introduction to these 4 characters, I think it's so short and sweet to the point, but also by kind of describing the coffee addiction they all have and how they take their coffee, you start learning so much about these characters. And it's just like, this is a really clever way to tell this story. And I really admire when filmmakers and writers are able to integrate stuff like that into their scripts.
I do too. And the graphic treatments, the writing on film sort of treatments that we get when you see those kinds of introductions, and see them written to sort of exaggerate them on screen, makes it just quirky and funny and keeps the momentum up on the film. And the one that strikes me that when he meets in the club is Como, played by Nelson Franklin, and he says, "Hey Como, you know everybody, right?" And the title that flashes for just a second is Como Knows Everybody, and it's that same sort of character description that we get. It's almost like they're opening the script for us, and I think that's a really cute bit of visual trick.
Not just visual tricks. They do amazing audio tricks throughout the film, which are so just dense. I mean, really, you start really paying attention to the film, and you're constantly catching little sound cues that they're adding to signify, like if Scott, if he thinks of something, you might hear a little sound or a ding or a like the sound of a register or whatever it is. You hear these little sounds that kind of trigger, oh, that was his reaction to thinking about this thing. There's like the sound of a Mac powering on. And it's a really constant world, and just kind of this feeling that's enveloping you, this sense of all these sounds everywhere that are as integrated into the story as the on-screen visuals.
This is a film vocabulary quiz. Are you ready?
I hope.
This is one I haven't heard quite literally in 25 years. What is the difference between diegetic sound and non-diegetic sound in a film?
Diegetic sound is sounds that are coming from something in the film. So like if a character puts a record on and plays a song and we hear that song is a diegetic song. Whereas if you hear a song playing, but it's not necessarily coming from somewhere, that's non-diegetic.
Non-diegetic. Andy, well done. Well done. You passed. And I hope that somebody learned something because I had totally forgotten what diegetic sound and non-diegetic sound was, and just diegesis in its own right. But this film is a case example number one of clever use of diegetic and non-diegetic sound, and sound that transitions between the two spaces, the two sort of oral spaces. And it's to your point, it is brilliant. It is brilliant in how he uses sound, and I'll move from your comment on sound to how he handles visual movements on transitions specifically. This is another film that just really highlights clever transitions. That we get these not just traditional shot reverse shot transitions between characters, but using those shot reverse shots to transform or to transcend space and time, where he'll have one character say one thing close up on him, and as we cut to the reverse shot, there's suddenly the response to that comment in the script is suddenly in a different location. That is amazing. It is brain bending, and the more I invest in the comic, in the graphic novel, the better I feel like I understand why some of those transitions exist. He has excised the discussion of space-time in the graphic novel from the film largely. But my goodness, if some of these space-time transitions don't feel like a nod to, at least an homage to that piece that has been taken out of the film. I thought it was just fantastic. He does go ahead.
It's funny that you say that, because actually when those happened, it made me think of you specifically in our conversation with Pablo Lorraine's No, and how much the same thing set you off.
Yep, it did. It did.
And I was like, I wonder if Pete loves it here, or if he also hates it here.
So why is that? Why do I love it here?
I think that here I really don't know, because it's the same thing. It's the same trick. But I think in the context of this film, the way that this cinematic world is being presented to us, there are so many elements like this that are happening all through it, where it becomes part of the language of the film and how the whole thing is working. In something like No, it doesn't really play those cinematic tricks throughout. It's just a conversation that happens to be happening, and in order to make it a little more visually interesting, they break it up over a number of different locations to just kind of make it not just one very staid scene. And so I think in my head, that's why it works better in a film like this than it does in a film like No.
That's exactly what I would have said. The world is built in such a way that it has set my expectation to transcend the terrestrially believable, and No did not do that. This film already has me thinking in sort of extra spatial terms. When he goes he leaves the living room, goes into the bathroom, closes the door, goes to the bathroom. We stay on him the whole time, and what I have to imagine is a set on some sort of a rotator. When he opens the bathroom door, now he's in the school building.
Oh, it's not a rotating set. It's people running really quietly and laying down all those new flats and floors. I saw the behind the scenes blog shot of them doing that.
Of them doing that shot? That's amazing.
It's crazy, but it's brilliant.
It is brilliant. It's really brilliant. So, I'm so glad you pointed that out, because it's an example of this sort of trick that really works for me here. And man, you're right. No, I was already on the, I wasn't crazy about it as soon as that. There was so much more about the movie that I really liked, but that bugged me.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
Tony Zhu did a bit on, I should put it in the show notes, he did an every frame of painting on visual comedy expertise in Edgar Wright's films. And it talks about a lot of his work, but the general theme is so many comedies, like straight up comedy movies today, have given up the visual part. If you listen to the big, the biggest comedies, you really can get the same, whatever humor you were going to get out of them, you could get the same humor because it's just people sitting around talking. And he highlights the way Wright uses transitions and uses visual tropes in his films that give you humor that you cannot get by just listening to the script and a read of the script. And I thought it was a beautiful sort of treatment of Edgar Wright's use of camera. So,
and in a film like this that is so visual anyway, with the comic book look and the split screens, and you've got the exaggerated action scenes or the build-ups to the action scenes where they're like running at each other, and all of a sudden, the space they're in is stretched and they're running, and you've got the just the look of everything going on behind them, and it's the visual comedy is there too, but I think it's just visual period. He's so smart with his visual storytelling. It makes every frame of this just something that you could pause and just look at, just kind of the magic that he's infused it with.
I really enjoyed the dramatic lighting shots too. I just wanted to shout out when, the sequences, typically I think Aubrey Plaza gets a couple of them, right, where she's yelling at him, and all the lights behind her go out and she's just this fiery face in the camera. I thought that was really, really cool.
Yeah.
Let's talk first shot, last shot.
Yeah, the first shot after our brilliant 8-bit Universal logo, which is one of my favorite things, and some on-screen text setting us up within the context of this world. We tilt down, revealing that we have actually been looking at a gray sky over a snowy rooftop of a house in Toronto.
And the last shot, Scott and Ramona go through the door, standing by itself, and they pass through it. The snow becomes flower petals, night becomes day, winter becomes spring. I
like the first and last shots of the film, but I don't see much in the way of a connection between them. I don't see really any tie where we could look at the first and last shots and really get a sense of the story that will be unfolding between them.
Well, only seasons changing are obviously terribly symbolic. And to start on the gray, snowy rooftop and end in spring that sort of happens instantly, I think to me, it represents an awakening. It represents, this is the ultimate transformation. He was not in a good place, Scott Pilgrim. He was dating a high school girl, largely inappropriately, even though they weren't doing anything inappropriate. He was just like, he was lost to the point that he didn't know how to grow up, as evidenced by this relationship by the girl in high school. So to me, it just signified the passage of sort of emotional time. And I really liked that.
That's actually a good way to look at it. And I like what you came up with. I think that's pretty nice.
Well, thank you, Andy.
I think it's interesting that the original script, Scott ends up with Knives Chow and not Ramona.
She's too good for him.
It seems so strange that they would have considered that, because it's, considering the way it starts, he's dating a high school girl, and then to leave it that way, it seems like it's like he would not have gone anywhere. So I'm glad they changed it.
Yeah, me too. But what's interesting? It was the book 6, as I understand it. Book 6 of the comic, the graphic novel, was actually written after the film was out.
I think it was after the film started. It was under production and everything, and yeah, because they
sort of took a nod from the work that they had done on the script.
Well, and they ended up using the end of the comic because he ended up writing it where Scott and Ramona end up together, and they ended up using that to decide to do reshoots after some test audiences, and basically have it where he ends up with Ramona.
Casting by Robin D. Cook, Jennifer Euston, and Allison Jones.
Yeah, between them and Mr. Wright, they really put together an incredible cast that it just seems they were all meant to play the parts they're in here on screen. Starting with Michael Cera as Scott Pilgrim. He's just kind of the perfect geeky kid who would be a bass player and also a huge fan of video games and really good at them. And because of that, in his own mind, think that he'd be able to fight as good as he does in those video games. Yeah.
He's a fascinating guy. I mean, he had come off of a couple of significant films getting into this, and so he was kind of a big deal already. But the thing that he's got going for him is he never really feels like a big deal. Speaking strictly of the music, as it turns out, Bill Pope says of Michael on bass that he's almost too good and he is so good we think he had to dumb it down to fit in with the band as they learned to play the instruments on these tunes. I did not even know he played the bass, but apparently he is quite good.
Which is really interesting, and it's I love that the filmmakers behind this really went all out, getting all of these actors to actually train as a band and learn their instruments so they could actually do the work on screen, and they also had to learn stunts so they could do their own fight scenes. And it speaks well to what the filmmakers were trying to achieve here. I mean, Edgar Wright said it was such an incredibly complex film because it wasn't just a musical, or it wasn't just a comedy, or it wasn't just an action film. It was all of them blended together. And then you see what they end up doing, especially Michael Cera when he's with the band, and yeah, he's great with the band. But then on the flip side, when he jumps into the fight scenes, he doesn't look like the sort of guy who would be a good fighter. But then you put him out there, and it's like he actually works really well in context of the fight scenes. It's just smart the way that they put the time in to train everybody so that they fit what they needed to do. And Michael Cera, gave 110% here.
Mary Elizabeth Winstead, too, as Ramona Flowers. She comes in as a very physical actor herself. She's she's a dancer, and she apparently is quite adept in the fight scenes, and also looked it.
She does. She has a great look, and she works really well as Ramona, this character that is the one has these 7 evil exes that Scott Pilgrim now has to defeat. Somebody who seems a little broken, somebody that he is attracted to, but she's there's that line that she is walking, and I think that Mary Elizabeth Winstead balances on that line so well as far as playing the kind of the broken character who would have had these evil exes, but at the same time has that connection with Scott and is working on trying to figure out what she needs to do to make it work. I really enjoyed her in this.
Me too. Although I have to say, of everybody in the supporting cast, Kieran Culkin was the greatest surprise to me as Wallace Wells. I really enjoyed him.
He is great. He really is so much fun to watch. Not in enough stuff. Kieran is one of those guys that I'd love to see in more, because I think as Wallace, the gay roommate, I think he brings a lot of just honesty and personality and fun to the role.
He's one of the more grounding characters in the film, even through his sort of sarcasm. I think he's the one that allows us to sort of see through some of the artifice, the comic artifice, more often than not.
Well, and he's also the one who kind of has the speech for Scott, and
right.
He's almost like the Obi-Wan Kenobi to Scott's Luke. And I think that's an important role that he plays in this film. And when he has the little speech for Scott about, if you want something bad, you have to fight for it. You got to step up your game, Scott. Break out the L word. That's that moment that Scott needed. He needed that teacher to kind of teach him that and help him start opening his eyes. And I think Kieran really brought it.
Ellen Wong is Knives Chow, the high school girl.
She's cute, and Knives is a great character, and I like that her character takes quite an arc of her own over the course of it, as she starts as the little meek high school girl, turns into kind of a Ramona wannabe, and then she kind of steps into her own as she becomes the fighter at the end, and then she's just too good for him. It's great. I love that.
She's she came to the film. Not a lot of credits, but she did bring a green belt in Taekwondo.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's one of the things that Edgar Wright apparently liked about her, that she looked so sweet and also was really beginning to grow in sort of her strength as someone interested in fighting. And so that was a good fit. Possibly not a surprise, but somebody I enjoy very, very much, Alison Pill as Kim Pine.
Yeah, she's great. The rest of the cast, I think they all work so well in their parts. I don't know how much I have to say about each of them individually, but I really love all of them in the roles they have. And Allison, she's just so bitter, like her coffee, and I love her as the drummer.
Me too. I obviously liked her a whole lot in Snowpiercer, which she did just a little while after this. But I actually kind of discovered, I developed my inner monologue relationship with her in The Newsroom, playing Maggie Jordan, which was, I thought, a fantastic show. And so she's just, it was canceled way, way too soon.
I think Pieces of April is where I discovered her.
Oh, yeah?
And,
that was also...
Yeah, just really always enjoyed her.
So the rest of the cast, you're right. Mark Webber, Johnny Simmons, Anna Kendrick, Brie Larson was a fantastic
what a treat.
Antagonist. Aubrey Plaza, all great. And of course, Clifton Collins Jr., Thomas Jane as the Vegan Police, and Bill Hader as the voice.
KO!
So good.
That's awesome.
The League of Evil Exes. We've got 7 more names to ramble off. Do you want to do that?
We have Satya Baba as Matthew Patel, Chris Evans as Lucas Lee, Brandon Routh as Todd Ingram, Mae Whitman as Roxy Riker, and Shota and Kita Saito as Kyle and Ken Katayanagi, and the Katayanagi twins, and of course Jason Schwartzman as Gideon Gordon Graves.
It was great. It was so cool to see Brandon Routh in here. I like him a lot. Chris Evans, of course, was a nice surprise. Everybody was wonderful.
I love when it comes to the League of Evil Exes. One, the fact that there is a League of Evil Exes is hilarious.
Yeah.
But I love the just the production design and the costume design and everything that went into the way all of these guys looked, and also the way that they integrated their number into kind of everything within each of their scenes. So when Matthew Patel is there, there are a lot of 1s. And then when Chris Evans as Lucas Lee is there, there's 2s everywhere. And Brandon Routh is 3s, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's just a really kind of fun way to continue the way that this is kind of its own little video game. And you've got these different levels.
Absolutely. And of course that a hardcore vegan is telekinetic and all powerful.
Oh, so good.
Let's talk a little bit about getting it made.
Oni Press, who released the graphic novel, after the first one came out in 2004, they contacted producer Mark Platt, who thought it would be an interesting thing to make. They Edgar Wright had just released Shaun of the Dead, and they thought he would be a good person to do this. They got him on board. They got Bacall on board to write it. And then they started working on it. But it took so long, and Edgar Wright went off to do Hot Fuzz, and there was a writer's strike, and all sorts of things kind of going on. And not to mention the fact that O'Malley was still trying to finish writing all of the different volumes, that it took until 2008 for them to start casting and finally start filming it in 2009. So it was definitely kind of a slow burn getting the thing off the ground, but it ended up working. It didn't sound like really there were any issues trying to get it made. It just ended up taking time to find the story.
Cinematography by Bill Pope. I have to say, and I'm sure you saw this in the behind the scenes stuff too, this camera team practically needed stunt people.
Oh, they're so good.
Did you see how they were throwing people around on these rope rigs?
I didn't see them throwing the camera people around, but
yeah.
I mean, you watch the film, when you have this much stuff going on in a film, it's clear that there needs to be a lot of technical prowess to make sure stuff goes fluidly and without people getting hurt.
There is a sequence where the camera is rotating around. It's that typical sort of hero rotator around, I think, Brandon Routh. And there wasn't a camera on a rig. It was the operator on like a trapeze that held the camera, and he was holding it, and they were swinging him around on this trapeze in decreasing circles, in shrinking circles around the thing. It was great. It was absolutely great. Why build a rig when you can just put a guy on a rope?
I want to see that at the next Cirque du Soleil show.
Yes, more cameras on ropes with actual people there. The production design by Marcus Rowland, art direction Nigel Churcher, set decoration Odetta Stoddard. I really love the choices they made to try to match the anime look where it's appropriate. The comic style is really interesting. It's got anime touches. It's not an anime sort of manga. It's very unique in terms of the look and the feel of it, and I think they made just the right choices, to my eye, to set the tone.
Not to mention that, but when you look at the locations, I mean, filming this in Toronto, which one of the producers says it's the biggest movie ever identifiably set in Toronto. A lot of it because O'Malley grew up there, or wrote this after living there, and really kind of tied so many of the images to specifics in Toronto. And the production design team really went all out to make sure they were making things look right, to the point where there was a bar, I can't remember which of the bars it is, I think it's the Rocket, where one of the extras went into the bathroom where Scott goes and pees, and thought it was a real bathroom and was using it because it seemed like the real bar, and people who had gone to the real bar and then had gone to this, you almost couldn't tell the difference.
I didn't see Stacy Pilgrim. It's actually Brian's sister. The character who the character Stacy is based on was actually she worked at the Second Cup coffee shop in Toronto, and got to know Anna Kendrick. And Kendrick wears her actual coffee name tag in the film, and she was supposed to be in the coffee shop. I don't think she ever made it in the
No, she
shop.
is. She's sitting down at
Is
a
she?
table when he comes in to talk to his sister, but Aubrey Plaza's there instead. And that's one of those moments where there's a great little sound cue where it's like as soon as he passes by her, there's like a little MacBook opening sound.
The bong, yeah.
Yeah, as she pops on screen.
It's too funny. Stunts by Brad Allen.
Yeah, the stunt coordinator, this was a film with a lot of stunts. I mean, there's a lot of digital work all through it, but Brad Allen and his team of stunt people did an amazing job of training the actors to do a lot of their own stunts, but also, with the real stunt people just doing some incredible stunts. And I mean, it's spectacular to watch how all of it is so well integrated into the story. And it's kind of a tour de force of amazing stunt work. A lot of which I think, Edgar Wright is such a fan of some of these kind of old kung fu movies and everything. I think he really got excited about the opportunity to do this story where these, 7 major battles happen, and had a lot of fun coming up with what these guys were doing. So kudos to Brad Allen and his team.
Jonathan Amos and Paul Machlis had an equally challenging road ahead editing the film.
Yeah, to say the least. I mean, with everything going on already, not to mention the integration of all the digital elements and the animation and everything that they were putting into it, it's a lot of work. And to keep it, at a breezy pace where you don't feel you're burdened by having to watch these 7 fights. And it's so funny because when the Nega Scott appears at the end, I actually rolled my eyes and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I forgot there was one more fight. And then they played that so well. I'm like, that was really smart the way they did that, because I was like, oh, there's more. But then they did that on purpose to get that reaction, which I thought was pretty clever.
Again, super smart use of the frame for visual humor. That's something you wouldn't get by listening to it.
Exactly.
That was such a great move, having them become friends. Sound designer, credit to James Boyle, re-recording mixers, Chris Burden and Doug Cooper. We've already talked about the use of sound. It's top-notch.
Absolutely top-notch. Yeah, I don't have anything else to say other than it's just, I think this is one of my favorite just uses of sound in a film because of the way that Wright and these guys play with it to just build this world.
Now, the music, you're not as crazy about the music for your meditation time.
No, I'd rather listen to Kundun for that. But Nigel Godrich, who did the score, I mean, it works in context of the film. And I think to that end, I give him major credit because he did exactly what the film needed to do.
He did. The tracks, at least the tracks of Sex Bomb, were written by Beck, which I feel like I could tell. They sound like Beck tunes, and Metric wrote Clash at Demon Head's song. Ton of collaboration, and if you look at the number of sort of releases of Scott Pilgrim music, it very much becomes almost operatic. The sort of size of inspired by music from this film.
And tapping into a lot of local Toronto bands, which I think speaks well to how much Wright and team wanted to kind of integrate that real sense of this community into the film.
If not a Best Picture or Best Director or Best Screenplay nomination, certainly this got a Best Editing nomination, Best Cinematography nomination. That would be my bet. How to do an award season.
This film certainly got a lot of recognition in the award circles, but I don't know if it's stuff that you would typically say, oh, yes, it's going to be winning for that. But yes, it did get nominated for things like the Best Fantasy Film, Best Editing. I don't know about cinematography. Nope, I don't see any cinematography nominations.
Well, that's disappointing.
On the list. But it still ended up getting 17 wins along with 62 other nominations. The one I wanted to point out, though, are the Golden Schmoes Awards, which are the awards that JoeBlow.com gives out every year. And it was actually nominated for 11 Golden Schmoes, took home 4. It won for Best Music in a Movie, Most Underrated Movie of the Year, Best Comedy of the Year, and Biggest Surprise of the Year.
I would say all of those are true.
All of those are true. The KOs, this is where it did not end up winning. It lost to Inception for Favorite Movie of the Year. Also lost to Christopher Nolan for Best Director of the Year. Trippiest Movie of the Year also went to Inception. Best Special Effects of the Year also went to Inception. And Favorite Movie Poster of the Year also went to Inception. Then there was Best DVD/Blu-ray of the Year. That went to the Back to the Future trilogy. And Best TNA of the Year. Mary Elizabeth Winstead can count that of her wonderful awards she's been nominated for. But she lost. It went to Piranha 3D, Kelly Brook's performance in that film.
Oh, for crying out loud.
Yes. Thank you, JoeBlow.com.
Anything else on your list?
Just one little note that I think also speaks to Edgar Wright and his understanding of the mentality of the people that are being portrayed here in the film. In the dream sequence in the film, there is some music from the game Legend of Zelda that he uses, and Edgar Wright was apparently so determined to get that music into the film that he actually sent a clip of the film with a letter that he wrote to Nintendo. And he said that the music is like nursery rhymes to our generation. And I guess it worked. So he was able to get that music to play in the dream sequence. I think that's very clever, and it's fun hearing that music. And it speaks to his understanding of this film he was making.
Oh, it totally does. That is brilliant. How did it do? Did all of this work, all of this attention pay off at all at the box office?
Well, Edgar Wright's comic book adaptation cost Universal $85 million, plus an additional $5 million thrown in by Relativity Media for a total budget of $90 million, or $99 million in today's dollars. They did receive some tax incentives, which effectively brought that budget total down to $60 million, or $66 million today. After its premiere at Comic-Con, then Fantasia Fest, the movie was released August 13th, 2010, opposite Eat, Pray, Love and The Expendables. It never found its audience, unfortunately, and it only ended up making $31.6 million domestically and $16.5 million internationally, giving it a total of $48 million or $52.8 million in today's dollars. This left the movie at an adjusted loss per finished minute of $117,300. Ay. But, Baby Driver's coming out soon, so hopefully it will do well, and proving that Wright can succeed without his Cornetto trilogy collaborator, Simon Pegg.
I am going to see Baby Driver 9 times in the theaters.
Just to make sure.
I have to do my part, and I'm going to, yes, this is clear.
Edgar Wright thanks you, Pete.
Yes, he should. You're welcome, Edgar. Andy, I think it's time for us to rank it.
Let's do it.
Head over to flickchart.com/thenextreel, or you can swipe over in your show notes and you can just tap on Flickchart, and that'll take you right over to Scott Pilgrim versus the World in Flickchart. You can add it to your list. Let's see how it stacks up to our list. Andy, I have to tell you, it did fairly well on my list.
Well, we shall see, Pete. First up, we have Scott Pilgrim versus the World versus Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?
This is going to get really annoying with all the verses. I'm going to say Scott Pilgrim versus the World.
Yes, Scott Pilgrim.
Oh, thank goodness.
Scott Pilgrim versus the World. I'm going to stop doing that because that's going to get really
That's going to get
annoying.
old. Yeah, that's going to get old.
All right, next up, Scott Pilgrim versus the World, or more Coen brothers, Fargo.
Scott Pilgrim, please.
Boy, I don't know, man. It's Fargo, but I'm going to say Scott Pilgrim.
I knew you would. I didn't even have to say anything.
I know. Scott Pilgrim versus the World versus Aliens.
Oh, crap. Aliens.
Yeah, I have to go Aliens. Sorry, Scott. Scott Pilgrim, or The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
Scott Pilgrim.
Can you imagine if that was the versus? Scott Pilgrim versus the World versus the good versus the bad versus the ugly. You said, sorry, Scott Pilgrim?
Yes, sir.
Oh boy, really? This is a really close battle for me. I'm going to say Good, Bad, and the Ugly, though.
That's heartbreaking.
I know.
All right. Well, let's do it, traitor.
Okay. Ready?
One, two, three. Scissors.
Oh,
there you
right
go.
out of the gate.
There you go.
See? And I'm okay with that, but I don't have any guilt now.
Yeah.
Scott Pilgrim versus the World, or The Innocents. Oh, I love that movie, but I'm still going to go with Scott
Pilgrim. Yes, you are. Yeah.
Scott Pilgrim versus the World. Oh, or The Fisher King.
Still interesting. Tonally, I see some parallels there, but I really, really enjoyed this movie, Andy.
I hear you. I'm going to say The Fisher King, though.
I'm Scott Pilgrim.
All right. Ready?
Mm-hmm.
1, 2, 3.
Rock. Paper. Rock. Scissors.
Dang it.
Oh, that's fun. It gets really intense.
It is. It's good. Okay. Scott Pilgrim, or 101 Dalmatians.
Scott Pilgrim.
Scott Pilgrim, indeed. So that leaves it at Scott Pilgrim versus the World is at number 40 out of 309 movies. I'd say that's a pretty good slot.
It's a 5-star like for me over on letterboxd.com/thenextreel.
Absolutely 5-star like for me as well. I'd say it's a 5-star love if I could get it.
I would do it. I would love it. I would love this movie. God, I would love it so hard.
Didn't want to know that. Thank you for sharing.
Where do we go from here, Andy?
Well, it's summer vacation. You and I are going to be taking the month of July off to hit the beaches. See ya, suckers! Okay, not really, but we are taking, if you can believe it, Pete, this is our first hiatus on the show since we started back in November 2011.
Wow.
It's crazy that this is our first break. This is like
kind of ridiculous.
But we are hoping that this month will give us a chance to catch up on some much needed polishing up of the show behind the curtains. We will be back though for our July film board to discuss Valerian and the City of a Thousand Planets, and then return with the regular show the first week of August, where we'll be kicking off our longest continuous series yet, the Star Trek Anthology. Holy cow.
Wow.
Yes, indeed.
Is that a kind of a bucket list thing for us? Is that how you'd categorize this?
I guess so. I mean, I never thought of it that way, but once the topic of Star Trek came up, I think it instantly became something that was like, we have to do that.
Yeah. And but for me, it's always this question of, I talk about the show, and people I talk about it with always say, what did you think of the, Star Trek, whatever, usually the latest Star Trek. I say, well, we haven't done that. You haven't done any Star Trek? So I feel like it's a series we should have had done already. And so we're just kind of sweeping it up. This will feel really good to be finished with. It's going to be long, and we're going to love it. Don't get me wrong. but it'll be long.
It's going to be fun. I'm actually looking forward to it. I haven't gone through watching the films like in a series like this since you and I in college watched. I think it was like 1 through 5. Was it when the 6th one came out, or was it when Generations came out?
Oh, I'm sure it was Generations. It had to.
It was probably Generations. We did a marathon, and we watched all the films leading up to it. And that was the first time that I've ever seen the first one. So this will be the second time that I will have seen the first one.
Really? I don't think I remembered that. Go figure. Yeah, it was Star Trek because Generations came out in '94. So
yeah, that would be it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, that's fantastic. I really am looking forward to it. I have gone through all of them fairly recently. Just at the end of last year, we did a 13-week family movie night marathon of all of them, and so I introduced them to my kids, except the first one, because I actually wanted them to continue watching, and I knew that if they tried to get into the first one, they wouldn't keep up with the second. So it went over very, very well. So I'm looking forward to talking about it again, and even Nemesis. Even Generations. In the middle is tough. There's some transitional movies that are hard.
There are some spots, yes.
Well, between now and then, Andy, pretty much for the month of July, I got to go to bed.
All right. Well, bye and stuff.
Amazon giveth, Andy.
As Amazon always doeth.
And we love this movie, so we went straight to the bottom. We've got some... I assume yours is a 1-star?
It is a 1-star, yes, indeed.
Do you? Would you like to do the honors, sir?
Yes. Reality Check says, what the... was this actually a movie? I don't drink or take drugs, but that might be the only way to appreciate this movie. Sanity called and wants my TV back. I am very frightful of the future due to the positive reviews this movie has received. If I feel dumber for having watched this thing, what about those who don't even realize they are dumber from having watched it? I will admit that it wasn't the dumbest, as there were a few entertaining points to it, but overall I was stunned at the presumably acid-induced idiocy.
That is awesome.
I will say, as much as we are praising this movie, I do feel that there is a good contingency of people out there who probably are going to feel this way.
Yeah. No, I believe it.
I feel like there is definitely an audience for this, and there's definitely an audience of people who should not ever watch this.
Well, and you know what? I mean, that's really the recommendation, right? Is that you're going to watch the movie, watch it with an intention of trying to understand what the filmmakers are doing, what the cinematographer is doing, what Edgar Wright is doing. Because if you just watch it for the surface, like comedy of it, I can totally see how you would think it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I get it. I didn't, but I get it.
It's like watching Baz Luhrmann.
Yeah, right. Well, this review, in fact, it sort of spins off of yours. It is titled Me versus Scott Pilgrim versus the World from October 2nd, 2016. Greg writes, I just don't get this. I was supposed to like this, based on what I heard from people, but I just found it completely annoying. Then I remembered I hate Michael Cera, and that probably had something to do with it. And you'll be glad to know that 2 people found this review helpful.
Oh, that is good to know.
Mm-hmm.
That is good to know.
Thanks, Amazon. It is hard to believe that we have been having in-depth weekly conversations about movies since 2011.
Oh, I know. You're telling me. Producing this show week after week requires a ton of work behind the scenes. If you'd like to help support our efforts, one easy way is by using our originals page when shopping for books and movies that we've covered.
Just visit thenextreel.com/originals. Your purchases made through our links give us a small commission at no extra cost to you and allow us to keep having these great conversations.
In Season 6, our Disease Films series had adaptations like The Omega Man, based on I Am Legend, The Andromeda Strain, Children of Men, and Blindness.
I Am Legend is so much better than The Omega Man.
What about the Will Smith version?
Don't get me started.
For our This Is Real Life Jack series, we talked Black Hawk Down and Seabiscuit, some great true stories based on fantastic books.
And we had more listeners' choices like The Fly, The Emigrants, and Scott Pilgrim versus the World.
You just did a series on The Fly on the Sitting in the Dark podcast. Did you read the original material?
Wasn't watching every Fly movie enough?
Our Big Betty Davis series featured adaptations like The Little Foxes, Now Voyager, All About Eve, and Whatever Happened to Baby Jane.
Are you calling Betty Davis big?
Only in personality and force.
She is a force to be reckoned with.
We talked about the entire The Godfather trilogy, of course. Iconic page to screen, even if it is just the one Mario Puzo book. I wonder if Coppola will ever make The Sicilian.
We also had some Zhang Yimou adaptations with Judo and Raise the Red Lantern. Absolutely gorgeous movies.
And don't forget the Hughes Brothers series with From Hell, based on the graphic novel. Brilliant material.
Kelly Reichardt gave us Wendy and Lucy and Certain Women, adapted from short stories.
Plus more Hayao Miyazaki as we tackled Howl's Moving Castle.
Find all these books and more at thenextreel.com/originals. Every purchase supports the show.
Get the full list of adapted films that we've covered at thenextreel.com/originals and start your next read today.